The Department of Home Affairs and the Department of Higher Education and Training are once again joining forces to update South Africa's critical skills list, the very tool that underpins access to global talent through the Critical Skills Work Visa. I'm Marissa Jacobs, Managing Director at Xpatweb, and I'm honoured to be joined by two people central to South Africa's drive to align latest skills in demand with immigration policy, making it easier for business to access global talent where it's needed most. Joining us is Pindiwe Mbele, Director of Corporate Accounts at the Department of Home Affairs. Hi, Pindiwe, and welcome here today.
Thank you, Marissa, once again for the invitation. It's always my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Pindiwe was closely involved with the previous iterations of the Critical Skills List and instrumental in the operational rollout of the Trusted Employer Scheme. Also joining us is Mampo Kuluve, Director of System Monitoring and Labour Market Intelligence of the Department of Higher Education and Training. Welcome, Mampo.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mampo takes a leading role in the research shaping the Critical Skills List, ensuring alignment with real labour market needs. Today, we look at how these two departments are working hand in hand to refine the Critical Skills List and ensure it supports a responsive, efficient visa system for South Africa. Good. So, Mampo, perhaps we can start with you. This is not the first time that these two departments are collaborating. On the previous Critical Skills List that was published first in February 2023, and then the latest version of it that was published in October 2024, you also collaborated with the department. Perhaps tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, Marissa, as the Department of Higher Education and Training, we managing what we call the Labour Market Intelligence Research Program, which is a flagship intervention of the Department of Higher Education and Training to make our post-school education and training more responsive to the needs of the labour market. And as part of that work, we actually do what we call skills needs assessments and anticipation, which is a process of understanding what the needs of the labour market are, so that as a post-school education and training system, we are better positioned to ensure that our graduates come out with the skills that are required by the labour market. And because of that flagship intervention or the research work that we do through the LMI research program, the Department of Home Affairs approached us to say we want to produce the critical skills list as mandated by our regulatory processes, and we wanted to be part of the Labour Market Intelligence Research Program. And I think that is we started this work back in 2018, where we then developed a memorandum of understanding, trying to understand now what the roles of the two departments will be. And our role as a Department of Higher Education and Training, it's more of a technical support, where we're conducting research and coming up with the methodology to identify the critical skills list. And we also conduct the research associated with that work. And we produce what we call the initial critical skills list, because the Department of Home Affairs still have to go through their own processes before they can actually produce or gazette the final critical skills list. So our role as a Department of Higher Education and Training is more to support the Department of Home Affairs, mainly in the research work that gets to be conducted towards the development of the list. We're not so much involved in the regulatory processes as well as the implementation of the list.
Yeah, so perhaps before we go through what those steps are in terms of drafting the list and what the regulatory requirements are and the role of the Department of Home Affairs. Let me perhaps first ask, in terms of the importance of this list and updating it, right? If we look at, we hosted a webinar last week where we had NGOs participating, and we asked them on a poll question, what are their thoughts around the critical skills list? And 55% of the participants said that it is that the list it's a good list, but there is still some room for specific occupations to be added to that list. And then if we look at the Xpatweb Annual Critical Skills Survey, last year's results show that 79% of businesses in South Africa still struggle to find the skills that they need and rely on international recruitment to be able to bring those skills in. What does that tell us in terms of the critical skills list?
You know, as Mampo has said, the collaboration between ourselves as the Department of Home Affairs and the Department of Higher Education and Training is what has resulted in us having the current critical skills list that we have. And in my experience, having dealt with the previous critical skills lists before this one, my observation is that this was the most researched one, because in providing us with the final list, in fact, the Department of Higher Education and Training also gave us what we call a technical report that actually explained as to how they came to, you know, the exclusion and inclusion of certain occupations and so forth. So that is why we have always insisted and said that the critical skills list is actually a living document. From time to time, you know, we have to revise it in line with what the labor market needs. And with the one that we have, I believe that there was, you know, comprehensive research that went into it. And we can only be excited to see what the next list would look like, having taken into consideration our experiences over the years of processing this one, and also feedback that we have been receiving from business communities as well as you know, South Africans in general, about what they deem or what they see or consider to be a critical skill.
Yeah. I can confirm that definitely after the publishing of the latest critical skills list, the feedback from business was overwhelming, that it was the best list ever, that it was really reflective. And always they will say that there's room for improvement. There's always more that can be added. And as you say, it's a living document, so we must keep on updating it. But it's definitely the best iteration of the list yet. So let's perhaps then talk about that research and that what goes into it, and maybe between the Department of Higher Education and Home Affairs, what are the steps that you go through when updating the list? And of course, maybe we can also touch a little bit on the workshops that you've had to consult and to amend your process, to enhance your process in terms of that initial research. What's been the outcome of those workshops? What are you changing this time around? And then what does that process look like, first from your side, and then once you hand it over to Department of Home Affairs, what you do with that list, taking it forward to get it to the actual published draft?
Right. I think our work always begins by evaluating, for example, the previous list that we have produced. And the aim of doing that is just to try and understand if our methodology is fit for purpose, if our methodology can be compared with some of the methodologies that are implemented by other countries as well. You may recall that we always say that our approach to the identification of the occupations that are in the critical skills list is to ensure that the list is credible and replicable, and also to ensure that it is benchmarked across other countries that are doing similar work. But most importantly, we also value the consultations, the role of stakeholders, and both the evaluations that we have consulted to date highlights the importance of continuous consultations, mainly because the quantitative aspect of our methodology is based on the information that we're getting from your quarterly labor force survey. And as you know, there are limitations, mainly because these are surveys based on a sample of 30,000. And when you begin to actually try and get to the specificity of the occupations, it becomes very difficult to really get the numbers that will reflect whether an occupations is in shortage or whether an occupations is in demand. So we always make sure that we strive a balance between the quantitative aspect of the methodology as well as the qualitative that comes through the various consultations that we are having with our various stakeholders, particularly business and labor, because as you know, there will always be contestation around the fact that we're having the highest level of unemployment in the country, and then the fact that we also have a shortage of critical skills in the country. So we need to continuously having to consult with our various stakeholders. So we do that by engaging, through the workshops that you have mentioned. So when we start with the critical skills list, we always ensure that we engage with our stakeholders. We start by reflecting with them. We have produced the 2024 list. What are the lessons learned from that previous cycle? What are the issues that they would like us to include in the list? Because one of the issues that they've raised when we were engaging through the NEDLAC processes was the fact that government only comes to us when they have the list developed, but we want to be part of the conceptualization. And I think that is a very valuable comment that we have received, because it really assists us to reflect on the entire process as a collective, not just as government alone. So we begin by conceptualizing and reflecting on the previous cycle in consultation with our various stakeholders, and we take the lessons and the inputs that are provided through that consultation into the development of the list itself. So whatever inputs that they are providing, we ensure that we take it into account when we are now conceptualizing in terms of the dimensions and the levels that we're going to be including as part of the methodology. And then the second stage will be the quantitative aspect, where we're looking into what the data we're having from the various quantitative surveys that we're using, mainly the quarterly labor force survey. What is the data telling us? That is also very important, because out of that process, we will then come up with some sort of an index where we can begin to rank the various occupations to see which ones are in the top 10 of those that are being critically in shortage in the country. So there's some ranking that we are applying in terms of grouping the sort of occupations that are to be in shortage. And we're using quite a lot of indicators as part of that process as well. For example, we're looking at the employment pressure, we're looking at the wage pressure as part of the methodology as well. And all of those dimensions combined will begin to give us some rough list of the sort of occupations that are currently in shortage in South Africa. And then we will move to the third phase, where now we're looking into the strategic documents of governments, because we know that, for example, the DTIC manages a process of identifying or developing the master plans for various sectors. And as part of that process, they begin to identify the sort of occupations that are needed to grow those particular sectors. So we engage with those documents, and if we find that the occupations are listed in multiple strategic documents, for example, we also take that as an indication that they are currently in shortage and they are needed, to ensure that the strategic projects of government do not get delayed. For example, we will look into the master plan, but over and above that, recently we have our government released what we call the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. We look into those 3 priority sectors and begin to understand the sort of occupations that are needed. And in most cases, these are new and emerging occupations, meaning that we cannot find them currently in South Africa. So we need some sort of a list that will allow us to get those skills from other countries as well. We will then look into the a list that the sector skills plans that our sector education and training authorities are producing as well, so that we begin to see if the occupations are also listed as a priority in some of those documents. That is another key dimension that we look at. But over and above that, we also have a survey that we have developed where we issuing out to as many of our stakeholders as possible, because we want them to begin to understand it's only business that can be able to understand if there are any technological advancement in their field of work or in their sectors, because that will have implications for the skills that are required for those particular sector, for example. So we release that survey so that employers can begin to tell us if there are any occupations that are in shortage in their respective sectors, and then the reasons why those occupations are in shortage, for example. But over and above that, once we have the list, making use of the work that you have produced as some validation, early validation of the sort of occupations that have been identified in the initial step of the critical skills list. We will look into the Xpatweb publication and see whether some of the occupations that have been now identified as being in shortage in our methodology are also being identified as part of the Xpatweb survey that you conduct on a yearly basis. But even before the issuing out of the draft critical skills list, we consult again with a representation of the constituencies to say, this is the draft list, what are your inputs? So that they can begin to provide inputs at that initial stage, and we take those inputs into account. But we have adopted what we call a consultative approach to the development of the critical skills list, because we want to ensure that we do not leave anybody behind, but we allow all of our stakeholders to input into the development of the critical skills list, understanding the importance of this list for South Africa in general.
If we end it at, then it gets published for public comment, gazetted for public comment, is that sort of the stage at which the baton then gets passed on to the Department of Home Affairs to take it forward?
There's different stages of consultation. I think in their methodology, they have one particular item that says validation, where now what they have produced must be validated by us as the department against our regulations to say, does this meet the regulations and so forth. So that at the stage of validation, that's when they pass it on to us. But the good thing is that throughout the whole process, then they have other workshops that we participate in, where we are able to give input to say, from a regulatory point, this is how the law prescribes that this should be dealt with, and so forth. So there's other consultations within that that she mentioned. For instance, you have also South African Qualifications Authority professional bodies, SAQA professional bodies, playing a huge role in terms of confirming whether this person who claims to be an engineer, whether they really are, and what is the industry standard, and so forth. So that is the work that would have, gone into into the consultation process, and then thereafter, then it will come to us, as she says, where we do the validation, and we say, okay, this is the list that we have in its draft form, and this is what legislation prescribes. Is there an alignment between the list and the what legislation prescribes? Where there's any conflict between the two, we then go back to them as researchers, so that then they also refine whatever issues that maybe we would have flagged in there. When we come to an agreement and we are clear about that, then we can then say the department can publish it. Firstly, also for public comment after all that work. Public comment where everyone, including, it will be South Africans, it would be expats that are working here in South Africa, it will be the employers, it will be the workers' union, different stakeholders who would have an input. It would be South Africans, amongst them graduates who are unemployed. Some of them would flag and the issue and say, but I'm unemployed and I'm qualified in that specific area that we've mentioned today in the list. Then we then have to take their considerations and their inputs into account. And as it always the case, also then we are required to respond to especially those substantive inputs, where we are able to explain, because also the requirement is that when the list goes out, it should be a list that is viewed in a positive way, in the sense that those who are unemployed would understand that when we bring in people who are critically skilled, those people will eventually and progressively transfer their skills onto those that are not that critically skilled.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that it's not actually quite as linear as you might expect. It is really the two departments running in parallel with each other and back and forth consulting. So it's not the Department of Higher Education and Training doing all the research and then at the end handing it over. It really is very consultative with not only Home Affairs, but with the public and everyone giving some inputs. I think that's so valuable, and I want to take it back to the point around our high unemployment numbers and how the Minister of Home Affairs has been quite vocal around having the Department of Home Affairs as an economic enabler and how attracting critical skills can actually grow the economy and how it can grow job opportunities. Don't you want to give us a little bit more detail around that?
There's been various research articles that have demonstrated the economic contribution of highly skilled experts into the economy. She also spoke about new and emerging occupations that we might not have, in our labor market. If you take for an example, if there's gas exploration. We are not a gas producing country, but if maybe there's an exploration there, it is only obvious that the people that will come and do that work will be people from abroad. But then they wouldn't be working by themselves only. There would be South Africans that maybe have studied in that particular field, but have never gotten an opportunity, to work on a gas plant or do gas exploration. So employing somebody on critical skills has a multiplier effect. You get to employ other South Africans within the space. And if those South Africans are youth, it is even much more better because they need assist us in dealing with the issue of unemployment. So with us as the Department of Home Affairs in processing critical skills, work visas, and doing it efficiently, making sure that people who apply for critical skills are onboarded as quick as possible for them to be able to start, working for their South African employers. For us, we understand that mandate very well, that critical skills applications need to be processed within the shortest of time. And you would have seen with some of the visa reforms that the minister has brought in, the reduction of the processing times, the removal of certain non-critical supporting documents to make it easier for such highly qualified and critically skilled people to be able to get a visa. And if you look at since 2022 up to now, we have actually reduced even the time within which we are able to issue the critical skills work visas. And we are doing this to support the labor market and also to address the misconception, or maybe it might be a conception, let me not say misconception, that if you want to get a visa to South Africa, it is so cumbersome, it is so complex, there's multiple documents required and so forth. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible, including, of course, the introduction of the points-based system by the department, where we are able to score the applicant in terms of certain criteria that has to do with the critical skills of the applicant. So for us, we are always looking at novel ways and other better ways of making it much more quicker and efficient for critically skilled people to get visas to come and work in South Africa.
Perhaps let me bring it back down to just where we are at the moment in terms of drafting the new critical skills list. It's been very topical because of the workshops. There's been a lot of media around it, that there is a new list coming. When can we expect to see that first draft of the new list to be, or the gazetted draft of the new list to be published?
We have started with the development of the new list. We're hoping to have it ready by June next year. But as we've indicated, the iterative process that we have adopted sometimes allows us to engage further, depending also on the sort of occupations that might have been on the list. We also need to take into account the engagements that we normally have with Netleg, through Netleg processes, but we're hoping that by next year we would have some sort of even if not the final list, but the draft list ready for engagements with our various stakeholders.
Yeah, as you can hear from Mampo, it's the list is still in its very infant stage, because of the work that they do. I mean, now it's June. We've just come out of the June month. Up to next year, it will be another year. That shows you the kind of work that really goes into the list. The consultation that goes into the list, and the number of stakeholders that have to be consulted. And as I said earlier, we as the Department of Home Affairs, we will then from time to time come in just to to give advice in terms of what our law prescribes. But most of the time and during this period, the Department of Education and Training is the one that will really, because they are dealing with the methodology. They would be doing most of the groundwork to be able to get this occupations. And you'll be surprised the amount of effort that goes into it. I mean, in the past, we even came to know that the department would even look at the number of students that are in institutions of higher learning. What is it that they are studying? In which year they are likely to complete? And in that year that they complete, what would be the environment for a particular sector that they are studying towards? And they'll be able to say, if you do not have enough students or learners in this particular area, come 2030, come 2040, you would not have enough South Africans to to fill the occupations that arise there. It even does it the other way around. You have too many students in this particular sector. By the time they finish, there would be an oversupply of those qualifications in that particular sector. So those are the things that they look at. And I think from the response that she gave, that if I was a student now, I would actually look at the list and start to give myself a sense of what is it that I should be studying towards, looking at what is it that is critical and currently scarce, for a country in a particular sector.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway from it. It's not just for business, but it's also for students, and also really a valuable tool to use. I think then in closing, maybe I can ask you first, Mampo, and then you, Pandibe. What is the taking this whole conversation into consideration and where we're at in the process? What's the win-win for all of us, from government and business, in terms of the new list?
I think for us, really, we want to see the participation of employers improved, because we can only be able to understand really the sort of occupations that are in demand and that are critical, that are in shortage, only through the conversations that we are having with them. They are in the face, of the advancement of technology. They understand the sort of skills that they require. Therefore, it's very important that they work with us and tell us of the sort of occupations that are in shortage in their various sectors, but also help us improve the methodology that we have developed. We've always been saying that we are transparent, in terms of our approach to the development of the critical skills list. Hence, we publish in the technical report that details the methodology that we have adopted, and also providing the initial critical skills list so that employers can begin to engage with it and help us improve and also try to, identify ways of trying to get the information from their particular sectors. I think for me, the role of the employers in this whole process of identifying skills that are in shortage is quite critical.
No, I also concur with what Mampo is saying, Marisa. She also mentioned the participation of provinces, which I think is very important. We've seen in the past that an occupation that may seem to be oversaturated in Gauteng might actually be in high demand in some other province.
Yes.
And it is always important that provinces also participate, where they'll actually have a voice in the critical skills list to say, no, you're saying this particular occupation is oversaturated, but actually in our province or in our area, there is a high shortage. And when we have those inputs coming in, it really gives us a critical skills list that is not skewed towards one particular sector or one particular province, but a national critical skills list. So we always encourage all the stakeholders to participate, because then what then happens is that people and organizations actually leave it up until the last end. Once the critical skills list is published, then there's this content. Why is this occupation not here? Why is this occupation here, and so forth? But when we have all the stakeholders participating and actually motivating, that is because research is also based on science. I cannot say that why is my occupation not there, or why is my occupation there, when I do not provide the necessary proof that it should be there. As she said, the research that is done is scientific, and they also look at all the other factors, how many graduates are unemployed in a particular space and sector, and so forth. So we always encourage, as the Department of Home Affairs, obviously collaborating with our sister department, that all the stakeholders should give input when the opportunity arises, through consultation, when there's workshops and so forth, to come and give us their own inputs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pindiwe. Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you, Mampo. Thank you for taking up your time to come and have this conversation with me today. And I hope it also serves as a catalyst to get business more involved in terms of this process so early on. We now hear that we've got plenty of time to consult in terms of this new list and give inputs. So I really am appreciative. Thank you so much. And I hope we can have a conversation again as we progress through the various stages. These are the conversations that drive collaboration and ultimately impact. What's clear from today's discussion is that the alignment between skills planning and immigration policy is essential. The update to the critical skills list is not just a technical exercise, it's the cornerstone of how we enable business growth, investment, and innovation.